Welcome to the Giggle podcast. I'm your host, Sal Grover. This podcast exists for cancelled women to have a voice in an era when most media is ignoring us simply because we stand up for our own rights and know that there is a difference between males and females.
Cool. Okay. So I'm talking basically to Australia's premier ACON expert. Is that what we're going to go with? Giggle. He's going to explain to us what Australia's version of Stonewall is and what they're doing. Hi.
Hi, Sal. Thanks for having me on. Okay, so I like the title of expert. Excellent. So, ACON definitely is Australia's version of Stonewall. And it's important to note that there are many countries around the world that also have a version of Stonewall. So we're not unique in this respect. So I might just start out a little bit with, I guess, what is ACON?
Okay, and because like Stonewall started as something really good, correct?
Yeah, so they're actually the ACON stands for the AIDS Council of New South Wales. So their primary mission when they first started up, and even today, their primary mission is around minimising the transmission of HIV.
Which is something that everyone supports. And so
100%,
that's not under attack in any way, shape or form.
No, it's not. But in some ways, I believe it does. That mission does also influence the way that they approach some of the policies. So I might get into that a little bit later.
Okay, cool.
Okay, so AIDS Council of New South Wales, they're New South Wales. So each state actually has an AIDS council. And they are all part of a federated AIDS organisation body that kind of meets and they discuss strategic direction and policy. ACON is the biggest one, followed by Thorn Harbour Health, which is Victoria's version.
Okay.
So
ACON is New South Wales based, is this correct?
They are based in New South Wales.
And are they national or?
Some of the operations that they do are national.
Okay.
So the bulk of their funding comes from the New South Wales government health budget. So they actually receive $13 million a year from New South Wales Health.
In comparison to other sort of organizations like this, is that a lot or average?
Look, I don't have a hard and fast comparison at top of mind. But yeah, like they're very large.
Okay.
And they're very well funded. And say New South Wales government is also promising them additional monies on the side. So we also have an LGBTIQ health strategy, and ACON is going to get a chunk of money to open up a gender health centre. So kind of like a health centre where people with a gender identity can go and meet all their needs.
Okay.
So like there's other things, they get a lot of money for all sorts of things.
Okay.
And then if you compare that to say in Victoria, we've got some of the players down there are attached to say the Victoria Pride Centre, which is this huge building that's for LGBTIQ advocacy purposes. Anyway, so ACON, AIDS Council of New South Wales, they get most of their funding for their health and their advocacy work. And advocacy is an important part of that. So they have to basically they promote acceptance of gays, and then they've tacked on transgender as part of that in the last sort of 10 to 15 years. And let's see, in 2008, they started actually investigating the possibility of copying the Stonewall Diversity Champion Scheme.
Okay.
So this is the same Stonewall Diversity Champion Scheme that's in the UK, the one that it sort of led to the Alison Bailey court case, where they gave some fairly outrageous, illegal advice to her employer.
And if anyone is listening that doesn't know the Alison Bailey case. So basically, Alison Bailey is a barrister who is also a lesbian who took her chambers to court for discrimination and also Stonewall because basically Stonewall had given them the advice that led to discrimination against her. And she won the case against her chambers, but didn't win against Stonewall because essentially the court was like, okay, Stonewall can give the advice, but you're the idiots who took it.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. They're the barrister idiots. It's like a room full of barristers.
Yeah.
But that shows the influence that these schemes
Yeah.
have, right? That there's a room full of barristers who took the advice of Stonewall diversity champions advocates over their own legal knowledge, right?
Yeah, and common sense. Because what has always astounded me with that is when you've got a group of barristers who their whole profession is based on evidence and truth, to listen to advice that tells you to ignore evidence and truth.
Yeah.
And that's going to work out well.
Yeah, so it just goes to show the influence that they have, right? So anyway, 2008, ACON decided, okay, look, we can do this here in Australia. So they took the initiative out of all the AIDS organisations, out of all the other health and advocacy and rights organisations. They're the ones that took the initiative. So they got the scheme up and running in 2010. They went door knocking around private companies, government departments, and the idea with the Diversity Champions scheme was really it started out with sort of a good idea actually. The idea is like to promote the idea in workplaces that it's not a bad thing to be gay or lesbian.
Fantastic! Like that is something like that's cool. The only thing I would say about that is it should be like with all of us. Your sexuality just shouldn't matter at work.
Yeah.
That should be the goal, I would say, rather than, it being, how would the situation we're in at the moment where it almost you're leading with that. But, I've never had a situation in the workplace where being heterosexual is even brought up. And it would be, to me, equality that's the same, like being gay or lesbian or bisexual, it's not even brought up either. It's just like, oh, okay, cool, whatever. And you like,
yeah, I mean, I guess my ideal, and from my recollection, it used to be, what did you do on the weekend? Oh, I went out with my partner, girlfriend, boyfriend, husband, wife, whatever. Oh, that's great. Did you have a good time?
Yeah.
That's kind of the extent to which I like to talk about my sexuality at work.
Yeah.
That's really it. I don't. So they had this idea that essentially that if we promoted the idea that it was okay to be gay and that we brought it up and brought it to the fore in the workplaces, then that would mean better outcomes for people and that, people would be able to come out of the closet and everything. There's a bit of a contention as to how much that was needed. But in the beginning, they did get a lot of doors slammed in their faces. And they were told, look, we don't really need to talk about sex at work. Pretty much what we've just said.
Yeah, and I suppose I don't mean it from the stay in the closet element whatsoever. I mean it from the if someone was to say I'm gay, it's like, oh cool, I have that I care about that as much as if someone said I'm straight. You know what I mean?
Not much.
I was just like great for you, cool. I bring your husband or wife or girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever, whichever is applicable to work functions, and all is great.
Yeah.
Just normal, just completely don't blink an eye.
Yeah. And I wonder, for me, how much, see, I've never really been in a workplace where it's not okay to be gay or lesbian. So I wonder if there are workplaces out there where it's not. And, that's entirely, I would accept that.
Completely. I mean, my boyfriend, for example, he works in, he does welding something. I don't know. I don't talk to him about what he does, but I just know that it's very male orientated and it's very manly. And every time, because he goes away for weeks on end for work, when he comes back, there's always that day of going you really sweary and just gross and dirty. Can we get back into home mode a little bit? So yeah, it's like, yeah, I'm sure there are workplaces that are sort of like that overly masculine that may be still in this day and age. Maybe it's not cool, which is horrible, and it should be.
Yeah.
Something. Yeah, I think we're
So
all on
look,
the same page with this.
imagine that, they did that and they went forward and they sort of were like, right, we're going to make it okay to be gay in the workplace in Australia. Good stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't really object to that.
No.
And there's two elements of what they do.
Mhm.
One is they'll go out and you can become a member, which means that you give them a little bit of money, you get a bit of consultancy services, you get to put the badge on their website, on your website, and you get to tell people you're an inclusive employer, and great. So it's a bit of a money making scheme for them.
Yeah.
And then there is another element to what they do, which is called the Australian Workplace Equalities Index, which is modelled on the UK Stonewall Workplace Equalities Index.
Mhm.
So what this is it's a giant document. So it's a 45-page document without any content in it. Like that's just the template of things that you need to do in order to win points, to get a score, and to go on a leaderboard of great employers.
Okay.
So, I think on the one hand, I've been involved in, say, maturity model scoring in workplaces before. And the idea is that you want to get to a place where, you have a certain level of maturity around things. So, if you don't have maturity, it might mean you don't necessarily have a policy about vilification, for example, and you want to get to a place where you have a policy that says it's not okay. And then you're mature and you can tick it off and you can just say, yep, I'm good. This is actually not about maturity. This is, I think it's 79 questions that you need, and you need to actually provide evidence of what you're doing every single year. So it's very much about taking a hugely active role in performing activities that ACON has put forward that it thinks that you should be doing.
Okay.
And so, and then at the end of the year, they have like you submit your report, and then they score you. Yes, this meets the criteria. No, it doesn't. And the really, really high scorers will get an award.
Okay. Yeah.
So, what's the problem with that?
I have a problem with kind of lists and things like that in general. I just think if we look at history, they never work out well.
Lists.
Yeah, I sort of recoil at the concept of them, but this is the thing with something like this. Like I can see just on paper and the kernel of the idea that's really, really good, because we all want acceptance for people and people not to be persecuted for who they are. Yada 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 yada. But I think there's a huge. But then I look at the most recent example that I can give that made me really go, what is that? Say Coles supermarket is now allowing 10 extra days of paid leave for people with not gender dysphoria or anything, with a gender identity. So you just get extra paid leave if you have a gender identity, for whether it's for mental health days or medical appointments, something. I'm not really sure. They didn't, in the article at least, didn't go into what on earth you'd be using these days for. I'm just assuming.
So that kind of brings me to the crux of what's one of the things I have wrong, that I think are wrong with the actual list itself.
Okay.
And so, this list of questions, of 79 questions, at the maximum, you can score 200 points, right? Okay, so providing gender affirmation leave to your staff. So you can imagine that might be worth, what is a person worth per week times per day times 10 days? So that's actually a monetary cost to the company, right?
Yeah.
That is worth 4 points out of 200.
So do you know what it just screams to me? This just screams social credit like in
Yeah.
China, that it just like a Black Mirror episode. That just
Yeah.
to me is where I could see the end point of this so quickly.
So the ABC provides 10 days of paid gender affirmation leave.
What the hell is gender
Um,
affirmation leave?
well, this is the thing. It's anything. It's anything you need to do to affirm your gender.
But
And
so
they,
could I take it? Like, could I be like,
yeah,
well,
you could. You could. You can do it to go and fill in forms. You can do it to go get your hair cut. You can do it to go and like like,
okay,
well, if you need to get a buzz cut because to make you feel more masculine, um, you can do it. They don't necessarily need you to take it all at once. But then also the ABC will hold your job for you for 12 months. So you can take 12 months unpaid leave as well.
okay,
So then think about that, like the cost of recruiting a replacement for you for 12 months,
months, yeah,
staffing your position, like this is a lot of money,
yeah.
right?
For people to go and have a day off to get a haircut.
Yeah. And when you sort of trace it back and go, okay, well, what have they actually done? What is gender affirmation?
Yeah.
Like,
How
is it changing your name by a deed poll? And it could be. So some companies, they leave it quite open. So some companies are really broad with what it means. Some are a bit stricter, or they say you've got to talk to your manager.
Mhm.
But it provides, and basically this index says this is a basic. This is a basic that you need to be inclusive of transgender people. And if you don't have this, then you're not inclusive. Right. So it
Wow.
kind of says this is a foundational thing that you need.
It just seems to
Yeah.
me to be detached from reality in the sense that, like, I come from like a family of small business owners. My parents owned a small business my whole growing up life. They don't anymore. But and they had, say, I think the highest point like 30 something employees. But if they had like even one going away for 10 days at a time, or having being able to have a year off for this specific thing, or if you just had like 5 employees taking a week off, it's not sustainable financially.
No, no, it's absolutely not. And this is why it really appeals to like big companies and government
Yeah.
agencies.
Because my thing is if you make policies that then put small, like the strain on small businesses, then those places might be reluctant to hire people. And then are we not getting more, like, are we really, is there
Is that
equality
helpful?
happening? It's
Yeah.
not helping then, because at the end of the day, it's all going to come down to money. And I mean, it even does for ACON, because you've got to pay for everything. So obviously they care about the financial side of this. They don't do something for free. So I just think that like, if you then say, if you are a non-binary person, for example, and there's a certain passion that you have that you want to pursue professionally, and there's a great opportunity at a small business, and you are a great candidate for it, but that small business is going like, we might not be able to afford you with all of
Yeah.
these other things that are going to come with hiring you. And I say that as, like, as a woman who, we understand what maternity leave can do to women's job prospects. Like, especially if you're in your late 20s, early 30s, there can be employers that, like, I know for a fact, that can be like shy away from hiring women for that reason.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been a real struggle that women have had,
Hmm.
and like
So,
this is not going to necessarily create a better atmosphere
yeah,
for young people,
that's what I'm saying. I'm
you
sort
know.
of saying it's sort of like creating a struggle rather than
Mm.
eliminating it.
Yeah, and employers are going to sort of start to like typecast the blue hairs,
Yeah,
aren't
that's
they?
that's the image I have in my mind. It's just like, you
Yeah, the
have
blue
someone come
hairs.
up um for a job interview and they've got blue hair, and you immediately go, okay, well, is there going to be other stuff here, baggage that, like, while I might morally support you, I financially can't.
Yeah, that's right. And then you're opening up yourself to as an employer to discrimination
Yeah.
allegations as well. So there's a whole like they are trying to create a right that
Hmm.
doesn't necessarily exist.
Hmm.
And if you contrast it with, say, like other people who might have needs for, I don't know, if I need to go to the dentist, I have to take my own personal leave.
Yeah.
If I want to have a shoulder surgery, if I need a shoulder surgery, I need to take my own personal leave. I don't get additional leave
Or
for
even
that.
like if you are,
Like,
if you're a parent and you're, there's like grandparents' day at school and you want to be there, or book week at school, just something that you want to,
yeah.
ballet concert, and it's just because I know, for example, I say this because my cousin's little girl just had a ballet concert and it was like on a Thursday at 11 a.m. because that's a time where parents can all go to it. Yeah, things like that. So they've got to take a day off, but it's just a personal day. And then so you've got some people having to dip into their personal days for their obligations, and then you have another group that gets extra rostered days off or extra time, like paid time off, just because of how they identify.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's creation of this additional entitlements, right? Um, and there are other entitlements that they try to create as well. So one of the big ones that I've been looking at is the toilet situation.
Okay.
So one of the foundational things that you need to have is gender diverse toilets. And it's interesting the way that I've seen. So I should also mention that I started researching this because myself and some other women put in some freedom of information requests to different government departments. And so we got a lot of data back about, what was being submitted in these index questions. So it's been interesting to see how the federal government departments have been responding to the toilet question. So ACON says you've got to have gender diverse toilets. You can't call them unisex. And, you can't, so you can't basically say, oh, yeah, we've got a unisex disabled or accessible toilet. And what I've seen...
Why can't you say unisex?
They say it's an outdated term.
Okay.
I don't know. They just declare declare things.
Oh God.
Yeah. So a number of departments have put up signs saying things like, if you see someone who you think doesn't belong here, mind your own business.
Yeah, I've seen those signs. Yeah.
Or the toilet is for everybody. Everyone's welcome to go to whatever toilet they want. Or some have changed the accessible toilet to be all gender toilet. And a number have also said, quite pleadingly, I would say, well, we've got a sign for now, but in our next time we get new premises or we refit the premises, our plan is to have all gender toilets.
Okay. And so is that like when they say all gendered toilets, or what the ACON expectation is this just one? I can't say unisex. So what's the replacement word? Who the hell knows? But unisex, so anyone knows what the hell we're talking about. So is it just one unisex toilet like Ally McBeal style, or you don't?
I don't know.
Okay.
And interestingly enough, one of the elements of completing this Workplace Equalities Index is getting your staff to complete a survey. And the survey question they ask about the all-gender toilets is literally, would you be comfortable having all-gender toilets on your floor, brackets, assuming male and female toilets were still available?
Oh, okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And they use that and they say, yes, everybody wants all-gender toilets.
Oh.
But what they've actually said is, do you mind other people having this thing over there if you still have your thing over here?
Because that's what it should be. Like,
Yeah.
I don't have any problem with that. I'm like, have male toilets, have female toilets, and then have the gender diverse toilet.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, again, I think it's not necessary. Like, it's
not necessary.
I mean, but
at the same time,
I don't mind.
I don't care. At the end of the day, I don't care. It's like, if you're going to wear the cost of that, if that's what you want to do, and it's something that you need to cater for, then fine.
Yeah.
You're adding that extra thing, cool. But if it's just the moment anyone else is having to give up stuff, and I'm just as strict on keeping male toilets. I don't think that
Men
they have to
don't
cut this.
want
No,
women in their toilets.
they don't.
They
Especially,
don't.
like, I remember the first time it really became sort of really hit home for me. There was a gender neutral toilet. It's like at a museum or something in Melbourne. And the guy said that, you know, he was at the urinal in the gender neutral toilet because they have them. And a mum and her 5-year-old daughter walked in. And he's like, every fiber of his being says, don't have my dick out when a mother and a young daughter are behind in the same room as you. So all of his instincts went, oh my God, what's going on here? And so he felt like he was in a precarious situation. And then the woman and the little girl felt uncomfortable, and everyone's going, we're all now feeling uncomfortable. Apparently, because there are some people who feel uncomfortable about their gender. But so now we just all feel uncomfortable.
Yeah. One of the one of the things that ACON does as part of this outreach into organisations is they will actually do a program of work they call a gender affirmation. So if you're going to what they call affirm your gender right now, they'll go into the workplace and they'll, you know, make arrangements and they'll smooth the way and they'll help you with any, like, you know, tricky situations and give you advice. And one of the things that they have advised is if you're a man and you want to affirm your gender as a woman, is you find another woman who you're friends with and you ask her to take you to the toilet. So,
no, do you know what's crazy?
So you actually use a woman as a human shield to go to the toilet.
Do you know what's so crazy? So I did a podcast and I just released it last week with Richie Herring, you know, Tulip, who's sort of become
wow,
real voice as a detransitioner. And he was saying he actually, for the first long time, didn't use the woman's bathroom. One, he didn't think that he passed as enough to, you know, for it not to be something that would be brought to everyone's attention and make him feel more uncomfortable. And he actually said he had an innate sense of respect of, like, I don't belong in there. I'm a trans woman. I'm not a woman. Until he got further into gender ideology, that was very obvious to him. But it was a woman at work who said, no, you belong in there. She opened the door for him. And he was like, you know, he takes responsibility. He's like, I still walked through it, but it was a woman that opened the door. And that's what hurts the most with us, is when it is a woman opening the door for these guys. Like, how can you do that to other women? But then if you've got an organization that's giving you points for the women opening the door and using women as a human shield.
Yeah, and that's it. Like, so when I first started investigating this Australian Workplace Equality Index scheme, I really thought, oh, look, it's not a big deal. You know, this is this is going to turn out to just be one of those corporate fluffy things where, you know, they just give advice and it's not a big deal. And when I started looking into it, I realized, well, firstly, some of the changes that they're demanding and some of the activities that they're demanding are quite onerous. And it's all geared towards, I initially thought maybe it was geared towards like raising money, possibly, but it's not. It's all geared towards that social influence and that policy influence. So it's geared towards putting them into the workplace and also influencing the culture of the workplace and influencing the language. So an example, right, is so one of the things that you need to do in the Australian Workplace Equalities Index is you need to have a pride club, right? You've got to have a pride club. It's got to have an executive supporter. It's got to have a HR manager or director in the leadership team. You've got to have a document indicating, outlining what you're going to do this year and how you're going to track your progress. You've got to have a document indicating what you're going to do if somebody leaves, if one of the people, the movers and shakers in the Pride Club, leaves the organisation. So, and then this Pride Club, they're the ones who do interface directly with ACON, right?
Okay.
So they've got a little organisation in the workplace that's working for them
So
and
is
literally accountable to them.
So is
Literally
this
accountable.
something that like places like, say, like ABC, like Australian Broadcasting Corporation, SBS, places like this have these?
Mega, yes.
Yeah.
They've got huge,
'Cause,
huge pride
I mean,
networks
obviously, this is not
with
something that like
very
small businesses
influential
could.
sponsors. Yeah.
Yeah, because a small business couldn't implement
No,
this. So it's really only the bigger ones that are doing it.
we're talking really big names.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I'm thinking like big banks and things like that. I'm
um,
like,
yeah. So we're talking things like, say, if I'm just looking at the winners from the Workplace Equality Index this year, consultancy Capgemini,
mhm,
Accenture, Ernst Young, Clayton Utz, the lawyers,
mhm.
PwC, RMIT University, Woolworths, Australian Taxation Office,
The
NAB,
Australian taxation office.
QBE. Oh, there. ABC, SBS, like they're all in there, right?
The
And
Australian
so,
taxation office.
yeah, yeah,
God.
yeah. One of the business partners who now works at ACON actually came out of the ATO, and that is a trans woman.
Okay.
And
But
he's a
your tax
big
dollars
mover
are
and
literally
shaker.
paying for this.
Yeah, yeah. He's a big mover and shaker as well in is it transgender WA, transfolk WA.
Okay.
So once they've got the Pride Club in there, like one of the things that they'll do is they'll kind of try to influence language. So, you know, like gender used to be, or gender equality used to be, let's have men and women equally represented.
Yeah.
But now, um, ACON, they're not using the language of transgender, they're saying trans and gender diverse,
Mm-hmm.
right? So gender diversity used to be women being represented.
Mm-hmm.
Now gender diversity is women and others? Question mark? Like, right?
Oh
And
God.
so there's a very large government department, which I shall not name because I have a source in there,
Mhm.
but they had a women's group. So like often in big organizations, you'll get employee groups. So you might get a parents group or a women's group or a pride group. So they had a women's group, and they actually changed the name of the group from the women's group to the gender group, right? So they changed it to have gender instead of women in the title.
Okay.
And then when it came time for them to, they basically wanted to write a submission to a consultation process around changing the Federal Maternity Leave Act, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they are a huge government department, and it's influential to
Mm-hmm.
have the volunteers, the women of that department put a submission through.
Mm-hmm.
And so instead of talking about women, maternity, breastfeeding, the impacts on your body, they actually took the tack of, not all women give birth. Some people who give birth are not women, blah, blah, blah. And so their submission, they've been influenced,
Mm-hmm.
right? And their submission contains all of this language now, this gender woo language, right? Of men give birth and everything. So that's a way where ACON's influence in the workplace and the way that they've redefined language
Well,
has
know what?
is going to
Yeah.
influence the revision of this act, because
Yeah.
the
Of actual
government
policy.
takes advice from these public servants.
But I just think even if it had no legislative power, nothing was being done to policy, even just inviting an organization into your company to basically police language,
Yeah.
that's enough of a scandal.
Yeah.
It's petrifying.
Yeah.
Because I'm still just trying to work out what the other word for unisex is. I'm like behind in this conversation. I'm just going, what else would you say?
well, it will be unigender, wouldn't it? Like, because it's
But
one,
this can
but
also
it's
the
one
thing.
sex. Unisex is like one sex. So
if you have, say, women's groups or women's advocacy groups that change to gender advocacy groups, I mean, we all know that what can end up happening is it's just a group of all men in power that have different gender identities, but they're all male.
Yeah.
And they're all doing it for their own self-interest. And so if you are a woman and even if you're a woman who does believe in all of this stuff, you're giving away your own rights. And so you're giving away any power that you had. And so you're at a lesser level in that company with having a voice of any description. But then again, moreover, if you're a woman who's against this stuff, I mean, you're powerless.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And like, you can sort of see it in one of the other ideas that they're smuggling in is the idea of intersectionality.
Mm-hmm.
So look, I know what intersectionality is,
Mm-hmm.
but many don't. I've been, some time ago when I was working in a government workplace, we actually had a webinar from I think it was minus 18, right?
Mm-hmm.
So my employer paid for minus 18 to give us a webinar, and one
What's
of the things
minus 18?
they're affiliated with Wear It Purple.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So what they do is like they do sort of like rainbow branded events to youth,
Mm-hmm.
and they're backed by corporations, and there's a really strong link with basically getting your brand in front of vulnerable youth.
Okay.
Right? Like it's not that awesome.
Yeah.
So they came in, they gave us a webinar all about pride and diversity and everything. And one of the things they talked about was intersectionality.
Mm-hmm.
And I submitted a question. What is intersectionality? And I was told, well, it might be like if you're like a woman and you're like a trans woman and you might be like Asian. The presenter did not know what intersectionality was. But they have this idea that they can kind of beat you with. You're saying, oh, you're not being intersectional enough. Right? So, and it's the one of the key things with one of the key misuses of intersectionality is the Privilege Olympics.
Yes.
So, you're not just a woman, you're a trans woman.
Yes.
Right.
Which, from my understanding, especially the history of intersectionality, it was never for the intersection of men claiming to be women.
Men and women, I know.
Like, it was...
It's a straight line.
Yeah, it was like, if you are like, and again, one of those things that from like the essence of it, what it began as a good thing, like if you are a feminist, but then you've got to like also intersect what like race and
yeah,
like socioeconomic issues, things like that make a lot of sense.
Yeah. There's a really great essay from 1975 called Sex, Race and Class by Selma James.
Mm-hmm.
And I think she was I'm gonna say she was Bahamian, but I might be getting that wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But she said, look, we've got the Black liberation movement, we've got the women's liberation movement, we've got the workers' liberation movement, and we've got the working class Black women all at home looking after the kids, making everyone dinner.
Yeah.
So it's like that's the intersection.
Yes.
You've got to look and see who you're overlooking, right?
Yeah. 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 So really, really good, important stuff, not men who claim to be women and are also Asian.
Yeah, that's right.
The other intersection is, or and very rarely men who claim to be women at home cooking dinner.
Very rarely, yes.
Doesn't seem to be happening. Yeah.
So look, they're smuggling this idea in. So they're saying, look, they're introducing this idea of intersectionality without really defining it, which I have a problem with because people will refer to it and say, well, and they'll refer to a sense of you being intersectional or you're not being intersectional.
It's just they're told that this is something virtuous, but they don't know what it actually is. So you just think you're saying something positive.
Yeah,
but
that's right.
It's not at all. Or it's not even defined in any way.
That's right. Well, there's actually New South Wales Health in the last year, I think, released an LGBTIQ strategy for New South Wales. They're throwing millions and millions of dollars at this. And one of the key things that they're putting forward is intersectionality. right? And I've read their 80-page document. It doesn't define intersectionality, but it says that we need to pay attention to the intersectionalities of things.
So in 80 pages, they didn't bother to
Like, what?
describe.
So, like, it's like, you know, this is real. Like, this has real consequences. And because this term stands in for what ACON thinks is just, right?
Yeah.
It gives, those people over there power
Mhm.
to define what they think is just,
And is it basically
right?
because I've never been someone who cares about this sort of stuff, so I can't wrap my head around it. But is it people just and companies just go along with this because they want to be to have the badge and get the award for being like the most inclusive? Like being inclusive, I'm on board with, but just being rewarded for that, I suppose, or being on a list or whatever. I don't see the merit in it. But is that what people just go along with it for that reason?
Yeah, essentially. So, I mean, they're taking advantage of a huge change in workplace
Mm-hmm.
attitudes.
Yeah.
So, and it's funny. So, I would probably say once upon a time, the worker had no power, but actually now the worker still has no power. But there is, the attitude of like HR is very different to say what it was, 15 or 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Like it used to be about regulation, industrial relations,
Mm-hmm.
and now it's very much about wellness at work,
Mm-hmm.
celebrating various cupcake days like Are You OK Day, for example, and community and togetherness and,
Mm-hmm.
making sure every individual is fully realized at work, retaining talent and doing whatever you can to make sure that you don't have like smart people walk out the door.
Yeah, which, again, like all of this, like at face value, sounds really great. But then to get that, what everyone feeling really nice and happy at work, in the background is this organization policing your speech and
Yeah.
what you can think and see, essentially. Because if you're there going, that's not a woman, that's a man, well, what is there any protections for that individual to keep their job?
Well,
In
see,
all of this?
again, this is one of the problems. Like, on the one hand, if you sort of think about it on an equity basis, sure, there might be, you might have the Pride Club, and you might have the Women's Club, and you might have the Hispanics Club, and everyone gets a club
Mhm.
who advocates for them. But that's not reality, right? The reality is there's no women's club. Like, say, for example, at my workplace,
Mhm.
nobody would protect me if I called a man a man.
Yes.
but but the but if you look at the Pride Club, they are well established. The Australian Workplace Equality Index suggests that they should be addressing the whole workforce in town hall meetings. So, which they do. So
Mhm.
they've got high visibility. They've got support amongst the executive. They've got, support in the HR department.
Yeah.
So they're like fully embedded in the structure, right?
Yeah.
And if, like in the Alison Bailey case, there was an issue in the workplace, the employer goes to the Pride Club and says, "Oh, what's all this about?" They go to ACON and they say, "What's all this about?" And ACON says, "Well, that's very naughty, and
Mhm.
that woman should lose her job."
So do you think there's going to be an Alison Bailey case type situation in Australia?
It would be very interesting if there was.
Mhm.
It's probably only a matter of time,
Fine. Yeah, that's what I
really.
was gonna say. It seems inevitable.
You've had your experiences with,
Yeah. I mean, in my
and
experiences, like, the Australian Human Rights Commission, they didn't side with me.
well, no, that's no surprise
Yeah.
because they are deeply embedded in ACON.
Yeah. I mean, one of the other things that I found really interesting in my whole process was that the Australian Human Rights Commission was one of the groups that really lobbied to get gender identity put into the Sex Discrimination Act. So I was sitting there going, at what point is this not a conflict of interest?
Well, the Australian Human Rights Commission, I'm glad you brought that up, actually. So one of the things that I noted about, say, we have these transgender inclusion guidelines for sport, right?
Mhm.
So they're issued by Sports Australia.
Yeah.
And I thought, I just wonder, who influenced these? Just wonder. Um, and so I had a look, and yes, the Australian Human Rights Commission is a founding member of ACON's Pride in Sport group,
Okay.
which is essentially, so we've got the Pride in Diversity for workplaces, and we've got Pride in Sport for sport. The Australian Human Rights Commission, they're a founding member. Sports Australia consists of 3 bodies: the Australian Sports Commission, they're a member of Pride in Sport; the Australian Institute of Sport, they're a founding member of Pride in Sport; and Sports Australia, they're a member of Pride in Sport. They also wrote those guidelines. And then there is a coalition of major professional participation sports bodies. There's like 7 of them, 7 bodies representing 7 sports, all members of ACON's Pride in Sport. So together, these bodies wrote the guidelines for transgender inclusion in sport.
So when people say in media that trans women in women's sport are completely marginalized and have no support, they're
It's a complete
100%.
lie.
It's bullshit.
It's a complete lie. I mean, we all saw Kieran Perkins on
Oh, well,
Q&A
yeah.
2 weeks ago. He is
I mean, just completely
he's
embedded in this.
he's completely embedded.
But what baffles me is that the likes of Kieran Perkins and all of these organizations, they're not there going like, look, we need more trans men on the Wallabies team and playing professional rugby union at a world-class standard. They're not trying to get female-born people into male sport, the big money-making sport, mind you. They're not trying to do it at all. It's just into women's sport. It's just men into women's sport. So there's not even equality in their own bullshit.
Well, this is where we come to some of the grooming and the gaslighting. So
Yeah.
the ABC, who have been for the last 4 years gunning to improve their score in the Australian Workplace Equalities Index, and they've just gone, right, we're going for it.
Why?
On God guns.
ABC, we watch, like,
Well,
it's an institution. We watch it anyway. Who gives a shit?
one of the things they did, right, was they created a new Instagram channel called ABC Queer. Now, we know queer is a slur,
Yeah.
right? It's like not nice. But it's called ABC Queer. And they promote
a gay person 25 years ago that they would be ABC queer and that would be praised of them being equal and welcoming of gay people. It just sounds like we're in an upside down universe.
So they actually drive visibility of people like Roxanne Tickle, right? So they promote Roxy Tickle as like, oh, I'm just this person. I play 5th grade hockey, da da da. And I was just triggered by what you said about trans men, because they do promote the images of trans men playing rugby, right? They don't promote, they don't have footage of Hannah Mountsie tackling a woman, right? they don't even show the trans man playing rugby. They show her being quite a lot shorter than the teammates, though.
Yeah. Just spectacular camera at work.
Yeah, and it's just it's just enough to sort of go, oh, isn't that nice? Playing footy on a weekend. And for most people, it's just that grooming of like, oh, look, they're happy, they're playing footy. And it's so surface level that no one even needs to examine what is underneath.
That's the thing. And still to this day, I'm still reeling from, it was when you do uncover all of this and you realize what's going on. And my big one was the trans women element of it. Because I was, I was, like we all started out, an ally in the sense of wear what you want, be your best self. I don't care. I want everyone to feel great about themselves. And then I realized it's that surface level stuff that's attacking our empathy. And when you start uncovering it all, it's the violation of your empathy that you feel. Like, how dare you? Because I would never have been okay with this, because this is attacking other people. This is attacking girls in sport, women in sport. Then when, even with like the putting males in female prisons, I'm like, fuck you all, because in male prisons, which are obviously horrible places to be, but there's lots of men who are vulnerable in there. And no
Men,
one's giving a shit. Like gay
no
men,
one,
young
no
men,
one gets
weak men.
raped because of their gender identity in
No.
prison.
Because my understanding is, once you're all there in a prison uniform, your gender expression's pretty much been taken away from you, because that's a right you have on that, like in the world, and you can present yourself however you want. But in prison, I mean, that just doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And so you've got all these different men who are vulnerable in male prisons, and we're not letting any of those ones. It's not like we're going, oh, gay men come over and use women as a human shield. It's just this one
Well,
time.
what about small men or
Exactly.
weak men
Weak men,
or
young men,
old men or like
well,
all the men
yeah,
that shouldn't be
basically. And like, and then
raped?
also we know that one of the most like in danger demographics in a male prison are pedophiles. In the moral hierarchy in a prison, pedophiles are at the very, very bottom. They often get killed and horrible things happen to them. Make of that what you will. But now, now they're IDing into women's prisons.
Yeah.
Because of course they are. They don't want to go to a men's prison. They know exactly what's going to happen to them. It's notorious.
Yeah, and I think that's tacitly been accepted by society as part of the punishment for pedophilia.
Yeah.
Right, hasn't it? It's always,
good luck in prison.
Yeah, but people say that, right? It's right or wrong.
Yeah.
That's part of what's being
you've committed the most disgusting crime any of us can think of, that even sort of, there are like
there are murderers who think that pedophiles are disgusting.
Yeah, exactly. They go after them. And so it's just and I mean, we saw the story this week in Canberra of a 27-year-old male who now claims to be a woman. He's got 72 charges against him of child sex abuse against his own sisters. And Magistrate Jane Campbell said that, under no circumstances could you be put into a male prison because of your gender identity.
Didn't they let him out on bail?
Yes.
Didn't they let him free? Yeah.
Yeah, because so the crimes, I think, were committed actually quite a while ago. It's they've just sort of just in the statute of limitations or something like that. I'm not 100%. The article didn't go into those details.
Yeah, it was a while ago.
Ago, and so because he hasn't had contact with his family for a while, the magistrate didn't deem him to be a danger to them, so he's out on bail.
The way the magistrate was talking, it did seem like she was convinced that he had done the crimes as well. Like it was really weird language that she used, like when setting him out on bail.
But also seemed convinced that he was a woman.
Yeah.
And no, and so like, are we having situations where like these magistrate, like these legal bodies, whatever? I mean, are they part of ACON? Is that where they're getting their guidance from to stand there in court and use female pronouns for a male sex offender?
So ACON does have a number of, so their Pride and Diversity scheme is really geared towards the sort of corporate / government / like the world of work, what I would say. So your workplaces, right?
Yeah.
And then they have other sort of groups and representations, and they have conferences. But say one of the things is like they have a lot of law firms participating. So it's not unreasonable to imagine that Jane Campbell might know somebody who is from Clayton Utes, for example. Her circle of friends might be, from these law firms, right? So like they're going out all over the place and they're influencing culture. They're influencing policy, right? And I think we've all been in a meeting or we've all been in a room where, you're trying to talk about gender diversity and then somebody pipes up, hang on a minute, what about other genders? That well-meaning person, and then the whole group has to stop. And so like all they need is one of those people in each of these organizations.
Yes.
Right? And they just need that person to get traction and
Yeah.
they've been so effective. But one of the things to note is that they've been doing this for a long time, right? They started this up in 2010.
That's just mind blowing because I just didn't know any of
2010,
this was
yeah.
happening at that point.
Like, their foundational members include the Australian Federal Police, the Department of Defence, IBM, Goldman Sachs, KPMG, Lend-Lease, and Telstra.
So
They are the starting lineup.
I just read an article this morning actually about Danny Laidley, is it?
Oh,
Who's Australia's most famous trans identified male, who was in trouble with the law a few years ago because he stalked an ex-girlfriend. And in that sort of legal situation, basically there were photos of him passed around to police or something, and I think he was laughed at or something.
Yeah.
Seems to be the story, I think. Anyway, so now Danny is now going to be, as part of a civil settlement that he's made with the police, he's going to be working on education and starring in educational videos for the Victoria Police.
Victoria Police are actually what they call a platinum member, a principal partner, not a platinum member, a principal partner of the Pride and Diversity membership scheme. So that means that while the standard rate for an organisation to be a member is $6,500, they actually pay $10,000.
Oh,
so they pay a bit more.
Woohoo! Lucky them.
Yeah, yeah.
And
so, yeah.
I mean, I just can't imagine at any point if like feminism had really, won over hearts and minds of greater society at any point in history, and we'd started like point-based systems of how you treat women in the workplace. It just wouldn't have flown. I mean, look at the punishment we're getting for Me Too.
So they're also a silver performer in the 2021 Australian Workplace Equality Index, which means that they would have received at least 140 points out of 200, right? I can tell you that's a lot of work that they've put in.
Yeah,
they've put a lot of work in, right, to attain that.
And so would that part of, say, if you're for a police force, would it be, would you get points for recording, someone you've arrested as a she rather than a him because that's the preferred pronouns?
I think, so the points are awarded more for things like updating your computer systems to allow you to put any like non-binary and trans and gender diverse options.
Okay.
So you'll see like, and again, updating your computer systems, that's not nothing, right?
No, yeah.
Or as you would famously know, updating your forms to allow gender diverse options. So that particular stunt would have been worth about, let's just see, forms, 2 points. To put
out of 200, is that correct?
To put birthing person.
So it's only 2 points, basically. I mean, it's like nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all bullshit because it's all just this made up thing. You're just trying to reach 200 points on a made up bullshit thing to get an award that is irrelevant and be on a list that no one really cares about. But all of the stuff you're implementing actually has an effect on everybody's actual lives.
Yes. And look, you're a CEO. You're not the CEO of the ABC or anything, but you're a CEO. Like, one of the things that you can also get 2 points is have your CEO or equivalent speaking or advocating at LGBTIQ events.
Happy to speak out and advocate for LGBT events.
LGB, yeah. So, like, you can imagine,
I just don't need to go and speak at events for sexually diverse heterosexual men.
So you can imagine, like, getting your CEO, like say we're talking government departments, we're talking Telstra, we're talking Virgin Australia, like the CEO writing a speech, getting there, booking it, going and delivering it. Like, That's money.
Yeah. It all comes back down to
It's
money.
money, right? How
Yeah.
many of those is the CEO going to do a year, right?
Yeah.
Are they going to do 1, 2, 5, 10, one a week? Are they going to come to my picnic? Talk about what I want?
So one of the big ones I want to ask is, who is responsible for making the media change, how they report on things, of having to put woman instead of trans woman and she, and do the pronouns and everything? Are there points in that for that?
No, there's no point in that.
Is that just out of the goodness of their heart?
I can't tell you exactly where that's coming from,
Mhm.
but I think it's going to be a number of cultural influences.
Mhm.
So there might be something coming out of like press council, there might be
Yeah.
legal advice, and there's definitely going to be internal pressure.
Whether
yeah.
the places that they're getting their advice from are then connected to these other things. So it's just all connected, essentially.
It's just all connected, yeah.
Yeah.
But one thing
by
I'll
accident.
say is the very first page in the Australian Workplace Equality Index template asks, have you had any negative media attention regarding LGBTIQ in the last year?
Oh my God, that's so fascinating, because it would be over a year ago now, maybe it was 2020. Oh gosh, maybe it was last year. Who knows? It's all gone into one. We were going, as Giggle, we were going to do equity crowdfunding, which is basically, you can only do in Australia. You can do it worldwide, but anyway, you have to do it with an Australian company, and it basically means that unsophisticated investors, which is just everyday people, can buy shares in your company. Like, say if it was like $50 worth of shares and blah blah blah. And I really enjoyed it, like really liked the idea, because it meant that for our next fundraising round, we could basically have women having ownership of the company. And so, basically, really being invested in it in every which way you could. And, encouraging women to start their own, like share investment portfolio and things like that. I thought, like, this is really exciting. And equity crowdfunding is a really cool thing that's happening. We could not get a single equity crowdfunding company to work with us, and you have to have one because it's very regulated. To the point, the biggest one in Australia, Virtuals, told us that they wouldn't work with us because the trans issue and criticism that we'd had in the media was an open wound. An open wound. We were just sat there, we were on a Zoom call with them, we just sat there going like, well, that's a no. Like, okay, I was just flabbergasted. I couldn't even believe it. And I was like, I'm like, I tried to explain to them what the issue was, and they couldn't get off the call fast enough. And no, we've never been able to do equity crowdfunding because of it.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, that would definitely qualify.
Yeah.
And so, okay, look, having your CEO rock up and speak at an event is 2 points. Negative media attention,
Mhm.
minus 25.
Okay, so you're getting into some significant points.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
So, like, if you've busted your ass getting your gender diverse policy, updating your computer systems, getting your toilets, like all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And then somebody goes and, I don't know, has an association with Giggle.
Yeah.
Of all
Right.
companies.
Yeah.
Right?
No, well, I mean, so I wonder
Or you comment negatively on the Tavistock closure, right? You
Yeah.
comment on the Tavistock, right? Or you are rude about Michelle Telfer.
So this really
Any of those things.
This is social credit.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is scary, like totalitarian stuff. Because like, think of a few weeks ago, did you see that story of the manager at the Coles supermarket in Western Australia? I felt so sorry for him. Basically, there was a trans man, so biological female, in the break room, lunchroom, whatever, who had taken her shirt off to show her scars to everybody. And this manager was really uncomfortable about it and went and asked higher ups what should be done.
Yeah.
Because there was just basically a staff member taking off their clothes in the workplace, which is just not appropriate.
It's not.
Yeah.
It's
Like,
not.
it's just, that's just one of the things, that we've kind of all come to accept in just civilized society. And there was nothing about this manager, like, seeing her as a female. I mean, I'm placing that on it because she's female, so deal with it. But he wasn't complaining about it in that way. It was more of a protection thing. He didn't want something to happen to her or whatever. All of the different things. He got fired for bringing it up.
Yeah.
Now, is that because basically the negative press that he would have brought to Coles because the media picked up on this story?
I mean, look, it's quite possible. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
absolutely possible that that's factored into it.
And-
So they would do a risk calculus and they would say, well, the trans person is the vulnerable person. The manager is in a position of authority, right? All of that stuff. And they would go, okay, well, what's the
Who's
risk?
the manager? Are you
Yeah. And so they would do a risk calculation and they would come back with it and go, well, all in all, it's better to cut him loose, right?
Wow. So it really does come down to if you don't just agree with everything we're saying and accept all of this, you're out. That is terrifying. So in a way, I wonder if, because say small businesses wouldn't be part of this ACON thing, if maybe being employed at small businesses will become more attractive to non-gender diverse people. And are we going to be split in that way?
Yeah, that is really interesting. And like you probably have in smaller businesses, like it's more likely that you need to have a fair degree of alignment in your beliefs because you're a small team and you really have to work together, don't you?
Yeah. Look, I've thought about it with my dad quite a lot because he's like basically retired now, but he works like with me. He's we call him the intern. He understands tech language. I don't. And so he talks to tech, like the coder people and everything, and it decodes my nonsense to them. And then he explains what they're saying back to me. And so that we never actually have to speak because we don't understand each other. We're 3 years in and I have not learned how to code and I'm never going to. It's not going to happen. Not a skill I have. But no, we've talked a lot about like back when he was like an employer, like what would have happened if, so you've got a small business. What if they say that, someone who's dealing with clients every day, if you've got a male that deals with clients every day and then they go, okay, I actually identify as a woman. I'm going to be wearing the woman's uniform to work. Every day I want you to call me she, her, yada, yada, yada. And then this is alienating to the clients. What happens in that situation? How does the employer, what cost is the employer wearing here?
I think there's going to be a huge reputational cost no matter what they do.
Yeah, because
they're stuck.
Yeah.
They've got to let this person, unless they can really finesse the situation. And I mean, I would be tempted to say, well, look, everybody wears slacks. Everyone wears slacks.
Saying. Is it the
all women wear slacks.
The only solution we could think of is having to make, because they had uniforms at their workplace.
Yeah.
But, it was just skirts or pants. Actually, a lot of women wore pants. But then there was like the shirt, the blouse type thing was different, and the guys sort of wore more of a collared shirt type thing. And it was like, okay, well, you'd have to then just have everybody in the same. So, okay, I mean, that's not the end of the world.
No, I don't think so. That's the really sensible solution, right?
Yeah.
And then it's really up to look how can you actually get to that point before the person who is that person genuinely wanting to work with you, right? And continue the relationship, or do they want to cause you problems?
Yeah.
And then I guess if someone wants to cause you problems, then.
Well, it just seems like all of this stuff is just going to cause more and more problems. Because if we go back to what we were saying at the beginning, my thought was that the goal of these organizations in terms of with sort of sexuality was to bring it so that it wasn't an issue in the workplace and that you wouldn't be fired if you were gay, or if you brought your husband or your wife to a work event or anything, that you wouldn't be punished for that. And so you're having equal acceptance, and that's awesome. But that's really different to then letting a man wear a dress.
Yeah, I don't think it is equal acceptance. I think maybe it started out being about acceptance.
Yeah.
But it's very much about visibility now, which is not the same as acceptance, really.
That's really true. Yeah. because there's sort of a time and a place for things, and especially what's so terrifying is that so many people don't understand that in this trans issue there is actually sort of a sexual element to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
People aren't aware of what autogynephilia is, and it's being treated as gender dysphoria, and it's not.
Yeah.
And so, if more people were aware of that, would they be as accepting of bringing what is basically a sexual fetish into the workplace and having visibility of it?
You've really got to wonder, like, and that's where I think a lot of those peaking conversations have to start with autogynephilia, and you have to talk people through it, and it's not very comfortable to do that.
It's pretty much what I lead with in my regular life when I'm talking to people, and because they go, "What?" And I'm like, "Yeah." I was like, I'm always like, "There's people. Gender dysphoria is a real thing. It's incredibly rare. It seems very distressing and quite mentally painful to have it. Wouldn't wish it upon your worst enemy. Sounds horrible. And we want help and to ease the pain and stress of these people as much as possible." Totally different story and scenario, and doesn't even come near having to discuss whether we all have to then use pronouns and change all of our world to accommodate this person. But it's just we can be caring. But then when you're talking about this other version of trans, it's autogynephilia, and they're getting off on it.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, is most of us
Mm-hmm.
would make reasonable accommodations for an individual who was, in a bad situation, right?
100%.
Most of us.
Yeah, 100%.
And
also,
not even that. Like, you know what? Okay, even all right, toilets, right? I've been in a situation where the women's toilets have been broken, and a man has stood outside the men's toilets for me and said, I won't let anybody in while you go and do a wee."
Yep.
It's a really, that's an accommodation in a rare circumstance. Okay.
I had a situation just yesterday.
That's not what we're talking about.
I was just at the squash club yesterday, and it wasn't busy at all. And there's a guy there, and he had that I know really well, and he had his 2 young kids there. His little girl was 6, and he just said, I had my little baby, and I was walking down the hall, and he goes, "Oh, can I ask a favor? My little girl, she's just in the bathroom, and she's been a while. Can you just go in and check that she's fine, and say that I'm standing outside waiting for her?" And I was like, "Of course I can." And I was like, even a dad,
Yeah.
he knew the boundaries.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's how much it has always been ingrained in us, that there are boundaries with these places, that even a dad wouldn't break them. But now we're expected to break them for complete strangers.
Yeah, that's right. And to have the human shield as well. Using women as the human shield.
Yeah, because I just think and because in the workplace, that's using women as a human shield. So having a trans woman, I hate using this language, but it's for sake of argument, a trans woman using a woman to be able to go into the bathroom. What woman is going to put her job on the line to say no?
No one is going to say no.
No.
And not only that, but
right?
this would be people that that you work with, that you have a bond with. Your friends are going to support you. Your colleagues are going to support you.
I'm trying to imagine. I always try and put myself in the situation, and then I think of one of my closest guy friend I have now. Then I try and imagine he's saying he's a woman now, and let's also pretend that I'm not as involved in this as I am. And then he's saying to me in the workplace, "Can you take me to the toilet?" Basically, like a child.
Yeah.
And even with a guy friend that I'm really close with, that I know really well, I'm instantly uncomfortable in that situation because it's just a female space.
Yeah.
And he's just because I'm then questioning, how much of a good friend are you because you don't respect my boundaries?
Yeah.
But there aren't big boundaries. These are really basic, just make society function boundaries. It's not go out of your way stuff.
Yeah, and it's got to it's at that point where you have to just question what is in someone's mind that they need help to go to the toilet, that they need the affirmation. And And that's what it really comes back to. It's about the affirmation.
Yeah.
And that's the language that ACON uses now. They don't say transing gender. They don't say changing your sex. They say you're affirming your gender, right? So they like, they have this, this idea that it always was. You were always a woman or you were always a man, and you've just, reached out and you've grabbed that truth somehow.
Oh, it's just such bullshit, because I don't think for 1 second that all of these people have thought that men are women forever and they're only now just brave enough to say it. Like, this is just nonsense in society. Like, I've just the social contagion of stupidity.
A little bit, yeah. Actually, ACON has several of these business partners who go out and they liaise with all of these companies who are members or participants in the Australian Workplace Equality Scheme.
Mhm.
And there are two women who both are non-binary, and they both said that they first started experimenting with the non-binary identity through their role at ACON. So they
What a
wanted to
coincidence.
make other non-binary people feel visible and that they weren't alone, and they started describing themselves with the they them pronouns, and then that led to them being further and further into the non-binary identity.
See, why do we have to respect that?
The lack of self-reflection in that anecdote
The amount of times
is
the anecdotes
phenomenal.
That was it when I was on the SBS Insight show. I don't know if it actually made it to air, but one of the stories, it was a lesbian couple. One of them is claims to be non-binary. It was the non-binary one who revealed that they wanted to know the baby's sex when it was just the wife was still pregnant, out of curiosity and just to have some attachment to the baby, because they were the non-gestational parent. And and I was like, so for you to feel attachment to this baby, you needed to know its sex, but you're claiming to be non-binary. So,
Yeah.
and then they were the ones that tried to raise the baby as, or had plans to raise the baby as non-binary, but 36 hours in, it was too hard. And I was like,
Yeah, it is too hard.
well, I'm like, you just said the quiet part out loud.
Yeah.
Like, why, if it was too hard for you, who one of you is non-binary, and you expect other people to do this, it was too hard for you. Why do I have to deal with this and do it? But I'm the bigot.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
towards their own baby.
Well, the thing is, right, the gaslighting, they will always say to you, why do you care what's in my baby's nappy, right? And the
Yeah.
thing is, I don't
I
care.
don't care.
I don't care. I'm being polite. The
Yeah.
one thing that you know about your baby is its sex.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't talk yet, so you don't know anything else about it, really. You
My,
don't know if it likes movies or hiking or like.
Well, they said that when they were, one of the things why it was so hard in that first 36 hours was that they were still in hospital, and it was constantly, is it a boy or a girl, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I've just had a baby. I was in hospital. Not one person asked me the sex of the baby, because it was written on the
It's
card.
written on the thing, yeah. It's written on
her
the
little-
tag.
it was just on her medical records. I don't,
Yeah.
wherever it was, no, not one person asked me. It was
And
in
they-
the NICU. I could have been having a non-binary baby for all they know.
And that's the thing, like, it's part of also not mixing up the babies. Like, they go, oh yeah, that's a girl. That one belongs to you.
They're all little lumps that look the same. Yeah.
Like, people, yeah. We don't care.
What can we do to sort of, what's the next step of exposing ACON? Is that the plan? Is that what we have to do, expose it?
Yeah, well, I have a website actually called aconexposed.org.
Fantastic.
So what I have done is I have analysed a number of Australian Workplace Equality Index submissions by government departments. So I got these through FOIs. Obviously, you can't FOI private companies. So as much as I'd love to see what Coles or Bunnings or Kmart are submitting, I'm not able to. So the data on there is fairly raw, but if you go and have a look, it gives you an idea of like just the money that they're spending and the effort that they're going to, and some of the wacky things that they're doing to like try to win favour with ACON. So like Attorney General's Department putting out a monthly newsletter with all like the latest queer titles and books and movies. I can
Are you kidding me?
imagine. Yeah, it's like, hey, you should all read Stone Butch.
Because the Attorney General told you to.
And like, Attorney General's department, that's actually the spies as well. That's the anyway.
Really?
Yeah, so that's the first step. I have data for 2021, and I've requested some data for 2022, so I can do a bit of like a comparison.
Mm-hmm.
What we need to start doing is just start talking about it more,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so probably not in workplaces yet, but if people are in workplaces and where they do think that things are a little bit out of hand or a bit ridiculous, you can always contact me on Twitter. I'm at Kowalski Kit,
Mm-hmm.
and just sort of have a chat about it.
Yeah.
So I'm very open to like anonymously publishing anything that looks like outrageous.
Fantastic.
Yeah, basically in our circles we have to keep on talking about it, and
Yeah.
we have to keep on linking back the behavior of the police, the universities, the corporations,
Yeah.
the government departments, linking it back to ACON.
Yeah.
Because as it is at the moment, it sounds a bit like the ramblings of a crazy woman.
Oh,
Like,
I feel like I'm wearing
like,
a tinfoil hat. Yeah.
yeah, like it sounds a bit mental,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like,
It's
but
only
yeah,
because of the UK and Stonewall that we've got that model to see what happens, that you can sort of visualize it a bit better, that you don't feel as crazy because you know what's happening other places as well. But otherwise, I would feel absolutely insane right now.
yeah, it's a little bit strange. So, and that's one of the things to keep in mind is that there's no like egregious thing. Like they're not going into workplaces with, and waterboarding women who say that trans women are men. Like they're not doing that. That's not happening. But what they are doing is that they're putting themselves in a position of influence where they have insiders in the organization. They're able to influence what those insiders think, do, say, etc. They make suggestions. They're able to reward those insiders for behaving in a certain way, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes to important things like who's writing the policies, okay, who are they asking for advice when they have a difficult HR question that involves a woman and a trans woman? Who are they asking for advice? It's all of those things, and we have to keep on relating that behavior back, right?
Thank you so much. You have been amazing. You
Thank
have
you.
a wealth of knowledge. I have so much respect for all of the women involved in this who are really, getting into the details in the bureaucracy of it. I don't have a mind for it at all. So I just learn from everything you're doing. It's amazing.
You're doing amazing things. Actually, I used to read, people would like screenshot your tweets and like put them on Facebook, and I would read them and think, who is this woman? She's so articulate.
That's pretty much my only skill. It's basically all I've got. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Sal. I'll talk to you soon, hopefully.
Thank you so much for listening. Please don't forget to share this podcast in all the usual places, as it's so important that we not only celebrate women's voices, but ensure that they're heard. For questions and episode suggestions, please post and comment on Giggle Talk using the hashtag title Giggle Podcast. All episodes are brought to you by the Giggle app, a female-only social networking app where women all around the world can connect to have a voice in a male-free environment, or to find roommates, give and get freelance work, lesbian dating, professional networking, and much, much more. Find it on the App Store and Google Play. Just search Giggle.